process that went into these four pieces. So let's start off with the very first one. These are all in sequential order. So the very first one, the second one, third, and fourth. So let me move this out the way here. So this began last year, and the idea was very simple. I wanted to make just a little tabletop bookshelf. I had some spare plywood, and I didn't want to just have it look so blocky, so I added this diagonal cut over here. You can see that. The joinery, I'm going to see if I can show you guys a little better here. Close to the camera. You can see here, let's see. So I basically made a tongue and groove type joint. For a long time, I didn't do anything with it. It was nice to kind of put some books on, a little countertop, but that was it essentially. Now, fast forward to about several months ago, and I said, I like this in principle, but the execution of it, so-so. I mean, it's not bad, but it's not great either. It just looks like I took some plywood, cut it up real quick, and made something out of it. Nothing particularly interesting. So with this one, I said, you know what? I like the overall proportions, but what if it were a bit bigger? And what if we added something more useful, like a drawer to it? So a couple of things I would note about this. I chose the pine because, well, first of all, I had it on hand, but also I wanted it to be for children. And it just felt more like a child's piece with the pine, as you can see. I thought, instead of going with a simple design like this right here, how can we change that? So I'm a photographer, and I do mainly portraits, but I also do modeling portfolios and things like that. And one of the things I always recommend to people is don't do drastic changes to your posing. Do little incremental changes. So I said to myself, what are some things that I can try that would be new, that would be, that would create more visual appeal, but also more utility. So that's for the utility part. Again, the drawer. And then for the bottom, you can see right here, a nice little gap. And then we also have this part right here, which is carried over. Now, I decided to go with a very simple handle for this. Now, I want to talk about the mechanism, because this doesn't have a back on it, which means that if you keep pushing this, it'll go all the way back. So why is it not going back? I actually used, it's kind of hard to see, some nails right in front, and the nails actually hit this part right here. Unfortunately, I miscalculated, and this is actually quite a bit narrower than this part right here. But overall, it works quite nicely. So I was pretty happy with this. As you can see, it holds the books quite well. But I wanted to take things a bit further and make them, I wanted to challenge myself further. And so I made this piece right here. Now, if you notice, we lost the drawer. Why did we do that? Well, a couple of reasons. One is I wanted to make this a bit faster, but I also didn't feel the need to have a drawer in this one. I wanted to give this to someone specifically, and I didn't think they needed a drawer, so I didn't include it. But notice here how we go from having, again, one solid piece to actually having several. Oh, we got 14 people. I don't know if there's any comments coming through or not. I don't think I can get that. Let me check my laptop real quick, guys. But thank you, all of you, for tuning in. For those of you who just joined, I'm talking about finding creativity, because I started with this right here, work my way to this, and to this, which you can see carries inspirations all the way back to the original in the previous version. So fortunately, I don't think we can do comments on here. But if you guys write me on Instagram, then I can check those. So if you guys want to write comments, you can go to Geller Woodworking on Instagram. But let's get back to this right here. So part of what helps creativity is having limitations. So let me grab something. So behind me I have a bunch of boards, and I said to myself, okay, I have a small piece of oak. It was probably from like here to here. I didn't have a lot of wood to work with. And so I said, well, maybe instead of having one big panel, which I obviously can't do, what if I cut it into smaller pieces and created a structure like this right here? So if you guys can see here, we've got our rails and our stiles. It's a very nice design. And again, I got rid of the drawer just to make things a little bit faster. I had a timeline. So again, having limitations both in terms of material, equipment, and timeline can really affect how you do something. So maybe you've seen videos where people say, you know, I'm going to do 3 different builds. The first build is going to be an hour. The second build is going to be 3 hours. And then, this first will be an hour. Second will be 3 hours. The third will be a full day. So it's nice to impose limitations on yourself. So with this, to get over the fact that I didn't have enough wood to do one big panel, I create this. And I said, you know, these two are the same exact color all throughout. So this is entirely pine. This is entirely plywood. I said, you know, what if I went with contrasting colors? So I have my oak here, and then I have my walnut. Now this is very angular. I said, well, what if instead of going with angles, we had more curves in it? So I added radiuses to each of these, or radii. So even right here, this also, it's kind of hard to see, but show you guys, that too has a curvature on it. And you notice here, this part, so we take this out, this is actually flush. So this face and this face are completely flush, which is fine. But I said, you know what, why not, instead of having them flush, set it back about a 1/4 inch. Also too, when you have a rounded edge right here, a round over, and this is rounded over, it creates a weird gap. So that also necessitated me, you know, recessing this about a 1/4 inch. But in doing so, it creates a very different look. So again, these are all serving the same function, but little incremental changes are creating something interesting. Now, I was showing this to someone last week, and they said to me, hey Aaron, I would actually love to buy one of those. So I asked them for their input, and they're like, hey, actually, you just do whatever you want. Whatever you want, just do that. So I said, okay, what do I like from the past pieces that I've made so far? And how can I carry them into this current piece? So I loved the fact that this center part was open. It wasn't just one solid piece. But I wanted to have a drawer, so I said, you know, maybe we don't really want to see what the drawer looks like. We don't want to have an X-ray kind of vision of this. So instead, what I decided was, let's go with this diagonal part right here, this diagonal element. But what if we created a cutout here instead? So again, I'm drawing inspiration from what I've already done for the new piece. And I said, you know, I do like having the contrasting tones of this. So why not go with a contrasting wood right here? Now for the front of this, actually, let me see here. So you can see here, this is poplar. It's a floating panel right here. This is walnut, and the handle, I can show you guys, that is, I believe, red oak. I've got a mix of red and white oak, so I don't always know 100%, but I'm pretty sure it's red oak. And I thought, you know, instead of just going with one area of contrast, again, the drawer front to the body, why not also have some contrast on the front? A lot of my work now is featuring oak and walnut. I have other pieces too where that is the case. And the more you do things, you begin to see tendencies arise, and that becomes your style. I think a way to kind of look at that is, years ago I was doing my laundry, and when I looked down, I realized that most of my laundry was blue. And I said to myself, I think I really like blue because most of my laundry is blue. And as you begin to create these pieces, you begin to gravitate towards certain things, and you begin to get a style. Now, I come from a different perspective because I do photography, and I've had to develop a style, because if I wanted to compete, I needed to create something that was different from other people. I didn't want to create what everyone else was doing. And so I began to realize there's certain things that I particularly have a preference toward. And so if you want to, command a higher price in woodworking or any art field, people need to be able to look at that piece and say, oh, well, that's my last name is Geller, so that's an Aaron Geller type piece, or whatever your name is, that they associate that style with you. So with me, I love having a lighter wood as the more dominant wood in the piece, and I like to have more darker elements for the accents. Again, you have the walnut here, but mostly lighter, and then again, we have the walnut as the accent, but mostly the lighter oak. So the mechanism for keeping this from just flying out is, show you, I have two, actually it might be kind of hard to see, I have two little screw heads that pop out. And what happens is they catch on the bottom up here. As you can see here, this is not flush. So I have probably maybe a 1/4 inch. And so I'm still able to get it in here, but again, it won't push all the way back. And then when I go this way, oh, let's see here. Someone just said hi. 1 second, guys. Okay, Robbie Patterson says hi. Thank you, Robbie. So we do have comments enabled. If you guys have any questions about any of these pieces, let me know. So let me show you the back of this. I posted this on a group, and someone said, how did you do the back of this? I said to them, well, I didn't do anything to the back of it. I just let it as is. Now, why did I do that? This is primarily going to be up against something, so you're not going to see the back of it. Now, let's say I did want to cover the back in some way. I guess there's two processes I would do. I could put a panel right here, and it just stays floating in here. So I could put grooves or rabbets in the wood, put a panel there. Or what I would probably do, a little bit differently, is I have my front right here. I'd probably put a front, or basically a back on this, that would be the same dimension as here. And that way, if someone was seeing it from the back side, they would just see essentially the front of this without a pull or a handle. So let's see here. So let's kind of go back a little bit to this piece right here. For some reason, this reminds me of something in Star Wars, and all those little fighter jets they have. But the way I got inspiration from this was I was on Instagram, and social media can be a pit, but if you know what you're looking for, it can actually be very helpful. So I like looking at both, second guys. I like looking at both Instagram and Pinterest. Pinterest, I actually find a lot of great inspiration on there, but I made a folder or album on Instagram of the type of small projects that I really enjoyed. And these projects tend to be more angular. And I saw one, it didn't look quite like this. Actually, well, the general shape was like this, but it had a shelf right here. And it was probably 3 or 4 times larger than this. But I really liked it. I liked the simplicity of it. I was really drawn to that. And I said, I'm gonna make something that reminds me of that piece, but actually serves my purposes. So if you're someone who is saying, I'm not very creative, first of all, don't believe that. A lot of times we tell ourselves things of ourselves that simply aren't true. Maybe you just haven't developed it yet. And I can tell you that sometimes, even in photography, I have not felt creative. But it's something that, it's like a muscle, you have to keep working at it. So I started off at this point of saying, okay, there's a piece that I kind of like, but how can I adapt it to my needs? So I came up with this. And then I thought, okay, I want to build something for the kids. And I moved toward this. And then again, limited materials. It's not that I didn't have more material, it was I imposed that limit on myself. And so in doing so, I took inspiration from this piece and other past pieces. So if you're feeling like you're, again, someone who's not very creative, which I think a lot of woodworkers don't see themselves as artists, and quite frankly, that's a big mistake. Art sells for hundreds of thousands, and there's a quote, I'm forgetting, but the person said photos sell for hundreds, where photography sells for tens of thousands, or rather, art sells for tens of thousands. And the idea is, it's about how you perceive yourself and what you do. And I think a lot of woodworkers, they see themselves as artisans, but not artists. And ultimately, if you're creating what everyone else, if you're creating art pieces or furniture pieces that look like anyone else's, you're not going to be very competitive. And it's also not very creative, right? So, let me see, did anyone write anything else? Sorry guys, I lost my train of thought and I was just trying to look at the comments. Where was I? Creativity. So, and how you see yourself. Sorry, live stream's a little bit different for me, since when it's a video I can rehearse it again and again and again, do multiple takes. But going back to the concept of viewing yourself as an artist versus an artisan, I see myself more as an artist than an artisan, because I'm infusing my work with my preferences, with my style. And again, we start off with something like this, and then we end up with something like this. I think part of my issue is when I look at something like this, I can think, well, this can seem very basic. And that's because I'm seeing it here in my shop, my garage. But if you guys go onto my Instagram at Geller Woodworking, you can see some photography I've done. And I've begun to imagine how someone else might use it and to photograph it in what I would call a lifestyle way, in a setting that really shows off the qualities of this piece, because there are a lot of intricate things and details that I've done to this. I've added chamfers to here, and some things I've actually done by hand with hand planes and chisels. So there is that, not only is it power tools, but I'm actually working with my hands, with a chisel to actually create some of these profiles to it, adding a bit more that artistic touch to it. So I guess in summary, start off with something basic, and then impose creative limits on yourself. Again, that could be time limits, that could be choice of material, that could be quantity of material, that could be the type of tools that you're going to use with it. But when you impose those creative limits on yourself, it forces you to innovate, but also find a purpose behind what you're doing, right? So again, this piece they did behind it was for my children. So I add little touches to it. Now, I don't know if you guys can see very well, but I actually have these kind of brass nails. Let's see, can you guys see this at all? Some brass nails on there. So I wanted this to have more of a rustic look. Again, the kids are going to be messing with this. Let's see here. Nice explanation of how the design evolved. Thank you, appreciate that. So again, add a purpose behind it and constraints. So add a board. Let me see if I can actually find this board. I just had it. 1 second, guys. That's the problem here is I need to get more organized, if I'm being honest. But I had a piece of pine, and so I have a couple ideas with that fit within the parameters of the material I have. So again, move from this to this. This again is a much radical departure, appearance-wise, but when I look at other pieces I've done, I very much like this style. So I actually made a bench that looked almost like this right here, which is kind of ironic because this looks like a bench. Now, I want to talk about construction methods. So with this right here, I used my router. I believe my router or my track saw. So I put a groove or a dado in here, and then I made this into kind of a tenon and then glued it up. Hopefully you guys can see that. And then with this one, I use pocket holes let's see if we can see here in the our pocket hole screws. Did that. And then again with this one, I use pocket hole screws. Let's see, oops. So I like the sides with the open frame, with the angled corners and the contrasting woods. Thank you. So part of the idea behind that, again, came down to limited material. So let's say, for example, and actually this is a good strategy overall, is you want to create a surface to support something. So in this case, it needs to support these books. Now, this is a very narrow opening, so unless you have a very, very tiny book, it's not going to fall out. You actually don't need to have all of this space, and so I'm able to take a smaller board and get away with a lot more. Maybe you guys have seen table saws where the outfeed, it's a metal outfeed, but it's not one solid surface, and so you're still able to have support, but you don't have this huge, cast iron thing, but you have more of a support. Let's see, try to get a better microphone. Yeah, so a couple of quick things. I do have a Canon camera. Okay, you know what? I do have a mic, and I'm gonna hook that up next time. So my apologies. I'll try to speak a little louder if that works better for you. But and also too, it is raining right now, so that could be affecting the sound. But I'll try to be a little closer to the camera. But again, going back to this solution right here, you don't need to have one continuous surface. You can, again, take some smaller pieces and do it that way. Even I made a, how would you call it? It's a side table for a sofa that can slide up against it. And so for the top, one second guys. So I'll explain the concept. So I had this top, the main structure was oak, and the top of it was walnut. So I wanted to have a wider surface. Now, take for example this right here. And let's say you need the surface to be maybe a ½ inch wider. What you can do actually is you could cut this in half, cut this in half, and then space them about roughly a quarter. And so, yes, you'll have a gap in there, but it'll allow you to actually have a wider surface than your boards will allow. So in certain applications, you can get away with that. So now, as far as the construction with this piece right here, I actually use tenons with a domino machine. So you can use dowels or however you want. Part of it was I wanted to see, I have the machine, and again, you can use dowels or any kind of, dowels, dominoes, biscuits could maybe work. But I wanted to try a different construction method, to see, was it easy or not. So the pocket holes, you can't see it on here, but there is a tiny little transition or a little lip going from the oak to the walnut. It's very slight, but it can be very annoying, and obviously I can't sand right here. So I said, okay, maybe I'll try dominoes because it's not going to shift on me. Now, I would say with this right here, a way that you can get around that shifting is if you intentionally have this plane lower than this plane. So again, that's part of the process, is you're trying new things, you're seeing what works. Now, if you don't have a lot of money, don't have a lot of material, I would say instead of building something really big, build something small like this, because you don't need a lot. In fact, one second guys, let me show you. Okay. Oh, had it right over here. You could build one of these out of this right here, completely. So you don't have to have much wood. I would say for the drawer, you could use some cheaper scrap wood that you have around, or even plywood. But when you're just trying to find your style and be creative, build something smaller. Again, it's a lot of things you can do. So I want to share with you guys how I made this right here. I'll grab my template. So to make things a little bit more efficient, I actually cut this out. So you kind of see here where the double-sided tape didn't really work out too well. But what I did was I sketched the, oh, let's see here. Can you guys see the lines on here? Probably. So what I did was I took double-sided tape, and then I would take this plywood, put it on here, put it over here, put it over here, over here, and then I cut this out with my router bit, and eventually I got this form, and then I could lay this on top. Oops, see here? I could lay this on top of here, and then cut out the form that way. So that was something new that I haven't tried so much. I've cut out small pockets, but nothing quite like this. So in the future, what I can do is I can take something like this, and I can just add a fence to it, butt it up to the workpiece, and then make cutouts. So, all right, I think it's been about 26 minutes. I want to see if there's any questions real quick. Alright, so I'll just stay on just for another minute or two if anyone has any questions. But thank you guys for tuning in. Appreciate it. If you guys have any questions about this, I suppose just let me know. And otherwise, yeah, I'm going to be, see, I got a couple projects that I'll be working on here soon. So I'm doing, let's see here. Have you found a decent double-sided tape? Can you share the brand or link? Yeah, 1 second here. I don't have any affiliate links, but this is called X-Fasten. It's relatively affordable. I think for 3 of these, maybe it's like $10 a piece. But it works really well. So far, it's the best that I have found. So it says Woodworking tape. So here. Questions. You chose now. Yeah, and I got that on Amazon too, by the way. Oh, I do want to share with you guys something that I got recently. Okay, interesting. Oh yeah, that's a good point. So, here's a router bit that I got recently. Okay, technically I got it, I think, in January, but take a look at this right here. So this is a 1/4 inch shank. It's got a bearing on the top. It's basically a copy bit. But what I love about it is, so yesterday when I was cutting these out, you know, I get the last maybe 1/4 inch, and then I would actually, so I'm hollow, you know, so I'm, 1 second here. So I'm hollowing this area out, going around in, you know, circles with the router, and I get to the last about 1/4 inch of thickness. And then what I did is I actually put a hole through here, just over 1/4 inch wide. And then what I could do is I could flip this piece over. Now, this was not attached at the time. And then I could run this bit through here. And what was remarkable to me is I didn't have dust collection hooked up to it, but it was pulling all this dust out. In fact, with dust collection, I think it got probably 98% of dust. So it's quite amazing when you're using an upcut bit, just how much dust is being pulled upward. But yeah, when you're making a cutout, you might find it better to only go so far and then take the upcut spiral flush bit, flip it over, and then go through the form that way. Went through a lot faster, and I wish I'd done it that way. Now, I will be honest, there was some burning with this. It's not terrible. I don't know if you guys can really see it or not. With it being cherry, over time it should darken a bit and be less noticeable. So, one second, guys. So, whether you guys are tuning in now or in the future, I'm just kind of curious, what kind of videos do you guys, what are you guys interested in? Do you guys want me to make a video of me doing a little build? Would you guys rather have like tool recommendations? Just kind of curious what you guys might be interested in putting out. So I want to, for those who have subscribed and watched these videos, I really want to know what you guys are interested in. I will say filming myself build something is very tedious, but you know, people like the process. I'm happy to share that process with you guys. I'm still trying to find my style for video. Let's see, is anyone else? Yeah. So I am thinking about doing, let's see here, kind of maybe some of my favorite tools that I use. So I know, for example, this is probably one of my most used tools, but I want to show you guys something interesting. So hold on one second. Let's see here. So one thing I've wanted to share with people, I'm a really big believer in this. So you guys are probably familiar with these woodpeckers. Little fun secret is I've had some come tarnished with like some small blemishes, and they'll give me like 25-30% off, which is pretty cool. But one of the issues I have with this is it's only so big, and to go with a bigger one is going to cost like $200 something. Who excites me? We will fill you. Okay, yeah. I think one thing that does excite me is sharing things that work at a lower cost but still accurate. So again, I probably paid about $120 for this, which I don't regret it. I love this. But last year I was doing timber framing, and I got this framing square, which I always thought that this was for framers, and it is. I didn't see an application for finer woodworking. Well, when we compare this right here, I got a light in front of me. Let's see here. This is almost perfect. I say almost perfect because maybe I'm holding it wrong or something, but I think for most situations, this is perfectly square for what you need. And I only paid, I think, $12 for this. I have an affinity towards orange. But what's great is I can use this to check cabinet carcasses, longer pieces. So for example, let's say I want to find out whether or not this is square. You know, I'm not getting the full, you know, reading on this. So this is probably about 8 inches wide. But with this right here, I can get the entire top of it. And what do you know? It's not completely square, which, as I look at this, it's not even cut. So that makes sense. But yeah, this is something I think a lot of people should have in their shops, especially if they're working with larger furniture pieces and not only going with something like this. And again, $150 brand new versus $12-15. And there's some really cool measurements on here as well for figuring out different things in framing, which again you can apply to finer woodworking. But I bought this for both timber framing and for fine woodworking. So, well guys, I am going to gonna get moving here because it's getting kind of sweaty in here, or humid, and it's getting late. But again, thank you for everyone who tuned in, and yeah, I'm gonna be putting out some more videos. Maybe some of you guys have seen some of the new videos, the new camera. I bought a Canon recently, mirrorless, to do better video, and so you guys will be seeing more of that. So, all right, guys, have a good evening, or yeah, I think evening is probably where most of you guys are at. So, let's see. Good job tonight. It takes courage to do the live stream. Yeah, I think it comes down to realize that, you know, it's not scripted. It's just me. I'm just kind of trying to provide useful information. Sometimes rambling. That's just the way my mind works. But it's a nice way to interact with people as well. So yeah, it's fun. But all right, guys, I'm gonna get moving. See you guys next time. Bye.